Here is a fact that should keep you up at night. Entire civilizations, some of them larger than anything in Europe at the time, rose up, built cities of stone and brick, ran plumbing that would embarrass a medieval king, and then vanished so completely that we forgot they ever existed. This is Chronica, and today we are walking through 7 of them, one by one. A city in Peru as old as the pyramids that never fought a single war, an island whose entire written language died on a slave ship, and the last one on this list, the biggest of them all, ruled millions of people and left behind no king, no army, and no clue about who was in charge. Stay to the end, because number 7 breaks every rule you were taught about how civilization is supposed to work.
We start on the coast of Peru, around 2600 BC. While Egyptian workers were stacking the last blocks of the Great Pyramid of Giza, a people on the other side of the planet were raising 6 pyramids of their own. This was Caral, the oldest known city in the Americas, and it is strange for one reason above all others. There are no weapons, no fortifications, no carvings of battles, no piles of skulls, nothing. In a city that lasted for centuries, archaeologists have found no evidence of war at all. Instead of an army, Caral seems to have run on ritual, music, and trade. They grew cotton and swapped it with fishermen on the coast for dried anchovies. A civilization built on textiles and fish, not conquest. And then, quietly, they left.
Which raises the question we will keep asking today. How do you forget a city that stood for 500 years? Now sail to the island of Crete, 4,000 years ago, to the palace of Knossos. The Minoans built something here that most of Europe would not have again for thousands of years. Toilets that flushed, real drainage, clay pipes, running water carrying waste out of the building. While the rest of the world squatted over holes, Minoan nobles sat over plumbing. They painted young athletes vaulting over the horns of charging bulls, and they wrote in a script we call Linear A, which to this day nobody can read. We crapped the script that came after it. This one stays silent. Then, around the 15th century BC, it all came apart.
On the nearby island of Thera, a volcano erupted with a force of 7 on the explosivity index, blasting out as much as 100 cubic kilometers of rock and ash. Historians still argue about exactly how much that eruption doomed the Minoans, but within a few generations, their world was gone.
Head south into the desert of what is now Jordan, and you find a city carved directly into rose-colored cliffs. This was Petra, capital of the Nabataeans, and their genius was water. In a place that barely rains, they captured almost every single drop that fell. They built dams to trap flash floods, cut hundreds of cisterns into solid rock, and ran water through terracotta pipes for kilometers. That water bought them power, because Petra sat on the incense road, the highway that carried frankincense and myrrh from southern Arabia to the Mediterranean. For a while, they were untouchable. Then Rome arrived. In the year 106, the empire simply annexed the kingdom. No great battle required.
Trade routes shifted, the money dried up, and a massive earthquake in the year 363 shattered the city and its water system. The desert took its rock back.
Now go to southern Africa, to a city that Europeans refused to believe existed. Great Zimbabwe rose between roughly the 10th and 15th centuries, and its builders stacked granite blocks into soaring walls without a single drop of mortar, stone locked to stone by shape alone. The largest wall climbs to about 11 meters and runs for hundreds of feet. 15 to 20,000 people lived here, and their wealth came from gold, funneled out to the Indian Ocean through the trading cities of the Swahili coast. Here is the ugly part. When European colonists found the ruins, they decided that Africans could not possibly have built something this grand, and they invented stories about Phoenicians and lost white travelers. That was a lie, told to justify a theft of history.
Modern archaeology is certain. Great Zimbabwe was built by the ancestors of the Shona people. The version they taught was the marketing. This is the invoice.
cross the ocean to North America, to a spot just across the river from modern St. Louis. Around the year 1050, this was the largest city on the continent, and by the high estimates, it held more people than London did in the year 1250. At its heart stood Monk's Mound, a flat-topped earthen pyramid about 30 meters tall, the biggest earthwork in all of the Americas, raised one basket of dirt at a time. 15 to 20,000 people lived at Cahokia, and then, over about a century, they walked away. Drought gripped the region, food and waste became impossible to manage for a city that size, and by around 1350, it was empty. Here is the detail that stops people cold.
No city in what would become the United States would grow larger than Cahokia again until Philadelphia, more than 600 years later, in the 1780s.
Far out in the Pacific sits Rapa Nui, the island most people call Easter Island. Its people carved nearly 900 giant stone heads, the moai, and the largest one they actually raised weighed about 82 tons. They also did something almost no other culture on Earth ever managed. They invented writing from scratch, a script called Rongo Rongo, carved into wood. And we cannot read a word of it, because the only people who could were torn away. In 1862, Peruvian slave raiders kidnapped around 1,500 islanders, roughly half the population, including the priests who knew the script. Smallpox finished most of the rest. By 1877, only about 111 Rapa Nui people were left.
For years, the story was that they destroyed themselves, chopping down every tree in a frenzy. But newer studies push back hard. Ancient DNA shows no sudden collapse, and it may have been rats, not axes, that ate the island's forests. The tidy morality tale, it turns out, was too tidy.
And now the last one, the one that breaks the rules. Roughly 4,500 years ago, along the Indus River, a civilization spread across an area larger than ancient Egypt and Mesopotamia combined, holding somewhere between 4 and 6 million people. Their cities, Harappa and Mohenjo-Daro, had grid streets, standardized bricks made to the same size across hundreds of kilometers, and something staggering for the age, household plumbing. Ordinary homes had bathrooms connected to covered public drains that ran under the streets. Now here is the part that has baffled archaeologists for a century. In all of it, they have found no palaces, no royal tombs, no giant statues of kings, no temples to a god-emperor, and almost no signs of war.
A civilization of millions, engineered to an obsessive standard, with no visible ruler anywhere. Who ran it? We do not know, because their writing, like the others, has never been decoded. Then, around 1900 BC, the rivers shifted, the farms failed, and the whole network quietly came apart. The largest and most advanced city builders of their world, and history did not even remember their names.
7 civilizations, 7 disappearances, and a pattern that should unsettle you. Greatness is not permanent, and being forgotten is the default, not the exception. Every one of these deserves a full video of its own. So tell Chronica in the comments which one we should cover next. The peaceful pyramids of Caral, the silent script of the Minoans, or the kingless millions of the Indus. Every answer you leave becomes a future episode. Subscribe, because the version they taught you was the marketing, and we are only getting started on the invoice.